Hello and welcome back to the GSMC Sports Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. I'm your host, TJ Mabardi. Today is Thursday, February 29th. Happy Leap Day, I guess you could call it. Shout out to Tyrese Halliburton for turning 6 years old today. We will be getting into a little bit of the Pacers game later on in this as well. But the plan for today's show is starting off by talking about the Lakers' comeback against the Clippers in the fourth quarter. An absolutely insane run by LeBron James and this team to work their way back into the game after trailing by 21 in the fourth. Then we will be hitting the remainder of the games that took place last night across the NBA before switching to the NFL, talking about the New York Giants, as there's been a lot of speculation about them potentially trading up in the draft to take a quarterback. So I will be giving my thoughts on that. And finally, we are going to end the show by talking about the college football playoff format that is being proposed as we sort of continuously, take steps to figuring out what this next iteration of the playoffs is going to be following the expansion that will initially be taking place this year for the first time ever. But before we get into a show, just a reminder to like and follow wherever you may be catching up with us. As well, please be sure to use the link that is streaming across the bottom ticker to tip or donate. That is GSMC, new link starting as of today, where it is GSMC Podcast.net, I believe. Again, first time here. I apologize for the unprofessional. GSMCpodcast.net. That is where you can leave a tip or donation, help get your questions the priority they deserve. Without further ado, getting into now our first segment of the day, and that is LeBron James and the Lakers comeback. Last night they squared off against the in-town rival LA Clippers, the Battle of LA that is always sort of made up to be this big thing, and yet I feel like a lot of the time we just haven't seen, especially in these past handful of years, the Lakers and Clippers at the peak of their powers at the same time. And last night it seemed that way for the majority of the game. The Clippers took a double-digit lead in the second quarter, and then other than a quick hiccup in the third quarter, they held that double-digit lead until the fourth, where they went into the quarter up 19, scored a quick basket off of, I believe it was a Lakers turnover to make it a 21-point game. And then LeBron James happened, where he scored 19 points in the fourth quarter, the most that he scored in any quarter this season, and he single-handedly outscored the Clippers, who only put up 16 in that fourth quarter as the Lakers came back. He played his vintage game where he was seeking out matchups that he wanted and just abusing them possession after possession. He was getting, his first option was to get Daniel Tice on him. If not, he got Harden on him a couple times and he went to work. He knocked down 5 3-pointers in 7 possessions to catapult them back into this game. Eventually, the Clippers started to double team him, but with his basketball IQ, he is just on a different level. He was able to find the open guys, because that's the thing, is if you send the double at LeBron, he is going to be looking for where that open guy is, and he found them consistently. And even then, so you had Hachimura and D'Angelo Russell knock down a couple shots for them, but even when they did miss, it was Anthony Davis in the low block who was grabbing these offensive rebounds. He got to the free throw line on one occasion, or he would kick it back out so they could run the play again. LeBron scored or assisted on 11 of the 13 baskets that the Lakers had in this quarter. He accounted for 30 points total. So an unbelievable, again, vintage run here. And it was the largest fourth quarter comeback in LeBron's career, interestingly enough. And games like this are why, the Lakers do still have a long way to go here. It's why it's hard to fully count them out, because despite it being year 21 for LeBron, he is still able to elevate his game to the highest of highs when the game calls for it. The consistency of him being able to do it on a nightly basis isn't necessarily still there, but the ceiling is still there. And that's where, when we talk about the greatest players in the NBA, it's pretty easy, and I think justified, to leave him outside of the top 3, maybe even the top 5. But it is that moment where, if you are playing one game to save your life, LeBron James has to be at the very top of who you are drafting to do so. And added to the fact that he is shooting a career high in three-point percentage, and we see the basketball IQ that he obviously still has at this matured age, it's just so unmatched, and he puts his teammates and himself up in the best possible situations to succeed. Now, all this being said, the question about them being contenders isn't just about LeBron James alone, because we know there is a lot more to this. We've seen him and Anthony Davis put together both really healthy seasons, considering how the past handful of years have gone for them, and yet they are still where they are, outside of the top 8 seeds in the Western Conference, because the supporting cast has been underwhelming for a lot of this season. A few of these guys started the season pretty slow and are definitely turning a corner, and that's a lot of the other guys in their starting rotation. Austin Reeves, Rui Hachimura, D'Angelo Russell. Russell's been great for the past few months. There are a lot of people, I think, out there that have doubts with Russell about some of the decision-making stuff, being a true point guard. I think that that's fair. The way that he's shooting, I mean, there's no way that you can argue that that isn't impactful for the team. But is he going to give you his 100%, especially just not have the mental lapses that have occurred with him throughout the course of his career? But he is a very good player. Rui Hachimura, I think, is just about the biggest X factor for this team, especially with the fact that Jared Vanderbilt is likely out for the remainder of the regular season. It is still to be seen whether or not he can come back at the end of the year, if he can come back for the playoffs, anything like that. But he was getting a lot of starter minutes for the Lakers, and I am not the biggest Jared Vanderbilt fan. I think that he is really nice on defense, and I understand the versatility that he can add in that sense. And the Lakers' defense has dropped off some since he got injured at the beginning of the month. But I do think that just with the lack of offensive talent there, especially with matching him up with that roster, they really struggled to shoot threes for a lot of the season. I didn't think that Vanderbilt playing him as many minutes as they were was necessarily the best thing for their organization. And now you have this other, call him a 4, call him a 5, whatever you want to categorize Rui as. He has length, and he can actually be a positive for the Lakers on the offensive side of the court. He is shooting 45% from 3 since the start of the new calendar year. He's had his ups and downs through his career in terms of shooting. He shot just under 30% from 3 with the Lakers last season when they acquired him. And this year he was sporadically injured in the first half, wasn't really performing all too well, was shooting in the mid-30s, but now we're seeing him turn his perimeter shot around. We know that the reliable shooter is in there after being a poor shooter through his first 2 seasons at Gonzaga. He shot over 40% in his final year, not on a tremendous volume, but still 40% is 40%. Any team will take that, and it's just a matter of turning that into consistency. I don't think that he needs to be a high volume guy, but at least being enough to be able to stretch the floor, force the defense to respect your shot, and open up the middle for Anthony Davis and LeBron. He also shot 45% in the 2021-22 season, so he's been able to do it at the NBA level as well. It's just a matter of being consistent and being reliable. I do think that he is going to hold a very big role on this Lakers team down the stretch of the year. Taurean Prince, Austin Reeves, also still some nice contributing players as well. Reeves was not great in the beginning of the year, but he has been turning himself around a lot, breaking out of that slump. And this is a group of guys that all have a lot of talent. I think that they struggle with depth a little bit. I've actually liked some of the Jackson Hayes minutes that they've got in terms of his effort on the glass, both offensively and defensively. And I think that he gives good energy minutes, but he's not necessarily super reliable. That being said, I could definitely see him getting some minutes off the bench against some of these bigger teams, maybe a younger team like the Timberwolves, who have the size, who have the youth, and just sort of, battle it out. I think that he maybe struggles a little bit more against Jokic, if that's the matchup that the Lakers end up drawing early in the first round. But, I think that, again, the conversation is about these supporting cast members, and whatever LeBron is going to do is whatever LeBron is going to do. I just don't think that, more so now than any other point in his career, it's a little bit more out of his hands, because he can't give the two-way effort necessarily that he used to when he was younger, where he was dragging these teams to the finals. The Western Conference is too good. So the Lakers are currently 32-28. They sit as the 9 seed. They are 2 games back from the 8th seeded Kings, which would require them to win just 1 game in the play-in tournament versus 2 as it currently stands as the 9 seed. They are 3 games back from the 6th seeded Pelicans, where they can get out of the play-in tournament altogether. They have 22 games left, so they can potentially make up this ground. It's not going to be easy. One thing they do have going for them is this homestand that is coming up for them. They have the 6 consecutive home games going forward. They go to Sacramento for 1, and then they have another 4 games at home. So they don't leave the state of California until March 26th, a month from now. So that is definitely an advantage for them. But it's not like it's going to be an easy stretch here, where they are going to have a slew of games versus the Nuggets, the Thunder, the Kings, the Bucks, the Timberwolves, the Kings again, and the Warriors all consecutively. That starts after their next matchup against the Wizards, which should be a nice little tune-up game. But the time is now really for them to make this push to get themselves together. I think that they are definitely capable of doing it, but I don't think that it is going to be an easy task for them. Quick note on the Clippers here before we enter our first break. I don't think that this is an overreaction game for them. They were without Paul George and Ivica Zubac. This was their first time losing back-to-back games since before Christmas. It was late December, and they were up 20 points in the fourth quarter, so clearly they were doing something right. They controlled it for the most part, but missing two starters and LeBron James getting on an all-time heat check for himself, it's hard to sort of overcome there. Again, no excuses for last night, but I just don't think that if you felt like they were a contender coming into this game, that you should be out on them as a whole now. Now, I will note, they have now lost to the Pelicans, Timberwolves, Thunder, Kings, and the Lakers during the month of February. We saw them as just about the hottest team in the NBA for a good month plus stretch during January, and now they're coming back down to earth a little bit more. Again, some injuries are playing into that, but I will say the defense is a little bit concerning, and I know that last night's sort of a tough example to pull in a vacuum where Harden is still very susceptible on the defensive end in one-on-one situations. Daniel Tice ideally is not going to be playing closing minutes for the Clippers, although I like Tice as a bench big. How much of an upgrade is Zubac? I definitely think that he's better, but not, anywhere near an all-star level. And the Clippers are a little bit in this weird area where they're not small. They like to play small sometimes, but they are definitely not big. And there is size and physicality in this conference, and we've seen that be their downfall during some of these games in February. So, again, it's not a panic button by any means, but these are things that we should take into consideration as we enter these last handful of games of the regular season. Final note here, this was the last ever regular season matchup between these two teams in the Lakers and Clippers as they share a home court. The Clippers are moving into a new arena next year, and I know that this idea that Steve Ballmer put out there about having the wall where they only admit Clippers fans into the section, it's pretty absurd and very controlling, and I'm not sure how it's all going to play out, whether or not they're actually going to be allowed to get away with this, but maybe they are going to need it, because this was technically a home game for them. It was, in actuality, very much a home game for the Lakers, and you have to sympathize, I feel like, with the Clippers a little bit. The fact that they are so significantly the lesser of the popular teams in their own city, that should this become a playoff series, somehow, this is going to be a full game of a full series of away games for them. So I don't know, just something to note there. I think they're going to be better off once they move into this new arena, but we'll see how this all works out. But that is all we have for the first segment. We're going to be taking a break, and when we come back on the other end, we will be getting into the rest of the games from Wednesday night. So stick with us. We will be right back.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing. Sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, waiting to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose if it's some moose shit. A stupid myth, you choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift. Oh. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
Welcome back to the GSMC Sports Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. We just wrapped up talking about LeBron James and the Lakers' comeback from last night. Now we are going to be moving on to the rest of the games from last night, where we had a handful of other games. Some were better than others, but all in all, in general, the majority of them were competitive. I want to start by talking about the Pacers versus Pelicans game, where the Pelicans were coming on the second night of a back-to-back, and it looked like it early. The Pacers were out-hustling and outrunning the Pelicans. And the thing is about the Pacers, if it hasn't been clear through the stretch of the regular season as it is, they don't just run in transition off of a steal or a block. It's every single possession you have to get back. Off of a miss or make, they are going to be looking to push the pace into the front court and look to see if they can get an opportunity at a quick bucket. They are the fastest paced team in the league, and as we saw last night, specifically in that first quarter, the Pelicans came out sluggish on offense. They were struggling, and the Pacers were taking advantage of that, where Willie Green talked about it after the first quarter that their offense was hurting their defense, and because of that, we saw the Pacers jump out to a double-digit lead. They led by 20 points in the second quarter, and they carried a double-digit lead up into the fourth quarter. Now, the Pelicans finally got the ball going for them a little bit. CJ McCollum and Brandon Ingram started knocking down some shots for them. The Pelicans cut the deficit down to 3 off of a CJ McCollum jumper on the elbow, and then from that point on, it was Tyrese Halliburton time, where he hit a step-back 3 over Brandon Ingram, and then on the next 3 possessions, it was Pascal Siakam off of a Tyrese Halliburton assist. Halliburton, down the stretch, almost LeBron-ish like we just talked about, was looking for a specific matchup, and that was pulling Zion Williamson out on the perimeter and taking advantage of the differential in quickness. The first play, the shot clock was winding down. Herb Jones and Zion both blitzed Tyrese, and he made an incredible pass, whipping it down to Siakam on the post, who hits a layup. The second play, Halliburton got Zion again on the perimeter. He blows by him, and then when the help defense came from the post, he went down into Siakam again to get the basket. And then the third assist on this was just off of a Miles Turner block against Zion. Halliburton fired it down the court to get a quick transition dunk for Siakam, and just like that, we had a 10-point game again. They end up pulling it out 123-114. Halliburton finished with 17 points and 13 assists. Granted, for the Pelicans here, the Pacers are an incredibly tough team to play on the second night of a back-to-back because of the speed they play the game with. The Pacers ended up taking 102 shots in this game, which is ridiculous. I think it is the Hawks that lead the NBA in shot attempts per game, and it's low 90s. So the Pacers were dragging the Pelicans into trying to play their game. It also didn't help the Pelicans that the Pacers grabbed 14 offensive rebounds So credit to the Pacers, obviously. I feel like I'm coming at this with a very Pelicans mindset, but with the Pacers here, incredible win. I still a little bit struggle to see whether or not they're going to be able to put 4 consecutive rounds together here, but I really like the way that we're seeing Halliburton and Siakam be able to begin building off of each other, because Siakam has always been a transition player, and now he is playing on a team with an identity of wanting to run, and an incredible playmaker in Halliburton. So the Pacers are absolutely going to be a tough first round matchup for any team that they play. Again, finals bound, I don't think so, but they are ahead of the clock in terms of the timeline, I feel like, with a lot of their key pieces being as young as they are. And I think that, this is an incredible season they're having, and this is going to be a nice stepping stool for the years to come. On the Pelicans side of this, they showed a lot of resilience there, making this a close one, but a moral victory is about all you get. Yes, you come back after being down big, you work your way back into the game. I feel like I might have came off a little negative on Zion there during that final stretch run, but he was, early on he was getting beat up inside when he was trying to drive. The refs weren't very big on blowing the whistle in this game, and he sort of took that personally. He had a couple stretches where he started just going all force and, working himself back into the game. But as for the Pelicans as a whole here, they never led in this game. This is just the first time they've done so all season, and they now fall to 0-16 when trailing entering the fourth quarter. That is definitely a bit of a concern for them. I don't know what it is necessarily exactly, because they have some half-court scorers in Brandon Ingram and CJ McCollum, who I feel like a lot of people are torn on McCollum at this point in his career, but I still think he can definitely get you a bucket. They have a good defensive team, but I guess in the future, have to dive more so into the exact numbers, because they're now 9-13 in clutch games this season. That is 24th in the NBA in terms of win percentage in those instances. The teams that are behind them are the Memphis Grizzlies, Houston Rockets, Brooklyn Nets, Detroit Pistons, San Antonio Spurs, and Washington Wizards. That is obviously not the company you want to be in if you're the Pelicans, and they are being selected by a lot of people as a potential dark horse team in the Western Conference, but that is a big red flag to me. They will get another chance at the Pacers on Friday, this time in New Orleans with a little more rest. I don't think they're playing tonight, but I actually could be wrong about that. So get another shot at the Pacers, though, one way or another. We'll see if they can get some revenge. Moving on in the NBA here, the Mavs won a shootout game against the Raptors. The Mavs were also playing in the second night of a back-to-back. Of course, that emotional game versus the Cavs on Tuesday night, where now in this game, Luka Doncic, it's his birthday. He picks up a 30-point triple-double, 30, 16, and 11. Neither one of these teams really played all too much defense, but I think that the difference maker in this game was the fact that the Mavs started locking down some more, at least in the third quarter, to help build themselves up a lead, and they just sort of carried that through the rest of the game. I thought, interestingly enough, in that third quarter, there were a handful of plays where I noticed specifically Kyrie jumping out on defense more, giving that extra effort, and I just feel like he is the most bought in from an individual standpoint than we've seen probably since he was with the Cavs, honestly. I don't feel like there was really this level with the Celtics or the Nets. He seems to be at peace there in Dallas, and I think that he is playing some very good basketball, as him and Luka are an unbelievable 1-2 combo. Also in this game, PJ Washington and Daniel Gafford, their trade line acquisitions, put together some very nice performances as well. The two of them combined for 21 points in the first quarter. Again, a lot of this coming off of those pick and pop, pick and roll situations with the two ball handlers in Luka and Kyrie. So I think that the front office did a very nice job in terms of going to find running mates that matched the style of play the Mavericks would prefer to play. PJ finished with 23 points in this game. That is the most he's scored since being traded to the Mavericks. Defense is still something that jumps out to me, but hard to scrutinize them too much for this one, being on the back-to-back, and they end up pulling it out. So we will leave it at that. The Bulls outlasted the Cleveland Cavaliers in double overtime. Both of these teams were coming off of the second night of a back-to-back. A lot of heavy workload teams last night. The Bulls out-rebounded the Cavs 74-39. Just an absurd differential there. That is the most amount of rebounds any team has grabbed in a game this season, is 74. They had 25 offensive rebounds, and Drummond was the man in the middle getting it done. He pulled in 26 himself. You know what? I'm not going to go down that route. I still feel like the Bulls should have maybe sold off some of these pieces at the deadline. I would maybe selfishly like to see some of these players playing for more competitive teams, but the Bulls get this win, so I'm not going to necessarily go down that route right now. The Cavs were coming off of that very emotional win versus the Mavericks with the Strus half-court buzzer beater. I wouldn't say it was Donovan Mitchell super struggling, but he wasn't even really looking to get his shots. I don't know what was up with him there. He only had, I believe it was 6 shots going into the fourth quarter. He finished with 19 points on 5 of 13 from the field. He had 5 turnovers and just 3 assists, so it was a strange night for him, not the caliber that we are used to seeing. Again, double overtime, and coming off of the type of win they had on Tuesday. Circumstances are a little strange there, but we did not get the best version of Mitchell in this game for sure. The Bulls scorers didn't have terrific nights shooting either. DeMar DeRozan had 35 points, but on 8 of 26 from the field. And Kobe White, who I have become a huge fan of, I think that he should be probably the front runner in terms of most improved player. He did a really nice job creating, but he was just 2 of 13 from the three-point line. He finished with 14 points, 12 assists, 8 rebounds. I was honestly surprised after watching this game, going back to look at the box score and see just how poorly he shot, because I thought he was controlling the offense very well. He was setting up his teammates. Even the looks that weren't falling necessarily, I didn't think that they were bad. But ultimately, it was DeMar who I, at the deadline, thought that they should move on from to make room for Kobe White. But it a little bit shows the level of maturity. DeRozan was the one who was able to get it done in overtime for them after he did miss the potential game winner in regulation. But the Bulls come out on top in this one, and ultimately there is not all too much to complain about. Rest of the games, I mean, there was a Timberwolves versus Grizzlies game where the Grizzlies came out firing. They were 12-0. Specifically, I thought they played tremendous defense on the night as a whole, but that offense with the Grizzlies still is just unfortunately underwhelming for them. And I think that, I mean, it was Anthony Edwards in the third quarter there who took over. He scored something. It was along the lines 17, 18, 19, something like that in the third quarter. They end up winning by 9 points on the night. So not the prettiest game for the Timberwolves, but I also think that I've been saying it all year. I know the Grizzlies have had their big time disastrous games, but I think they play really hard and they keep it close with a lot of these teams that maybe aren't expecting them to put up the fight that they do. Final thoughts on last night would be from the Kings and Nuggets game, where the Kings were up by double digits in the second quarter, and then the Nuggets just absolutely took over and really didn't look back from there. Jamal Murray was incredible in this game, but other than that, honestly, I was watching some of these actual other competitive games, so I don't have too much insight on this game alone. The Kings are interesting to me because I think that they are a very talented team. They were just about my favorite non-Celtics team to watch last season, and yet I just don't know if they necessarily have it in them to win a playoff series this year. Out of the top 10 teams in the Western Conference, I feel like they're probably the group that the higher seeds are hoping to play. Now, they are still a good team, and I am a massive Keegan Murray fan, but this season really just hasn't shaped up to be the step in the right direction I think that they were hoping for. So that's all I have on that game and the games from last night as a whole. We are going to be taking another break. When we come back on the other side, we will be talking some NFL and the New York Giants. So stick with us and we will be right back.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Welcome back to the GSMC Sports Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. We just finished up talking some NBA for the day. We are going to be moving on to some NFL with this next segment and the New York Giants draft decision. There has been a lot of discussion nationally over the past week or so about the potential of the Giants looking to move up in the draft and select a quarterback. They currently sit at number 6 overall. The way that things currently stand pre-combine is that there is pretty much a solidified top 3 in the upcoming draft. That is Caleb Williams, Drake May, and Jaden Daniels in some order. I find it very interesting, the discussion around Caleb Williams, as someone who is a little bit more of a casual college football fan. The way that we're seeing the fatigue about whether or not Caleb Williams should be the number 1 overall pick. I was watching, it was First Take this morning, and Dan Orlovsky said that he would draft Jaden Daniels number 1 overall. I don't feel too strongly one way or another. I think it's very interesting because we've heard about Caleb Williams for over a year now, about how he's going to be the number 1 pick in this draft. I don't know if it's people just almost being bored of running with that, or whether or not there is a real concern with Caleb and that things are shifting in a different direction. We saw Bryce Young be brought up to be this sort of can't-miss prospect, and while the jury is still out on whether or not he's good or bad, it was a very rough rookie season, in large part not due to his own doing. The situation that the Panthers were in was not good, but I don't know if maybe we're seeing a little bit of a mimicked thing here. And Drake May is somebody that I probably personally, from what I have seen, have the most faith in as a prospect, but Jaden Daniels has been a huge riser over the last handful of months. I say all this, JJ McCarthy is also gaining a lot of buzz. He is going to be participating in combine exercises on Saturday. If he comes out and puts on a performance, he could potentially climb his way up into the top 10 or higher. But that being said, the Giants are at number 6, so they are just out of reach of that top tier of quarterback. Now, if somebody else creeps their way up into some top 10 consideration, then the Giants could potentially have an option there without necessarily needing to make any moves themselves. But it would be the 4th quarterback taken off of the board, at least in this instance. And not that that means everything. Ultimately, it comes down to who you view the prospect to be and how you personally grade them. You don't have to worry about necessarily what happens on the board in front of you. But I do think that as it currently stands, the Giants are out of consideration for that tier 1 quarterback, and I think that they would be reaching on anybody they would select at 6. I am not so much a JJ McCarthy person. I understand some of the arguments for him, and again, there's plenty of time until the draft here, so things could absolutely change. But I think that if the Giants are going to make a decision at quarterback, drafting one this year, you would have to trade up. Now, personally, I don't think that that is the best way for them to go about this offseason, where Daniel Jones, I am also not the highest on, but I also think that he put together a very solid year in 2022. Helped lead them to the playoffs, helped win a playoff game, and that was with a lot of other factors. Dable coming in as the head coach and putting together a much friendlier offense for him. Saquon Barkley had a very nice season, and a lot of the offensive strategy revolved around him himself, and Daniel Jones was sort of able to be a complementary piece to that. But I also think if you look at the way that the Giants season played out last year, I'm really not sure how many quarterbacks could have succeeded. Now, we didn't even really get a chance to see it with Daniel Jones because he spent a lot of the year injured. That's because their offensive line is an absolute mess. I think that as we've seen, it has really not been working out for them. Evan Neal is not really the option there at tackle for them. Andrew Thomas, when he's healthy, can be a reliable guy for them. They've spent a lot of top 10 capital on offensive linemen in the past handful of years. I still think that it would be something that they should potentially look into. There's a couple guys in this draft, Joe Alt notably from Notre Dame, and then it's Fashanu, I believe is how you pronounce his name, from Penn State, is also touted to be a very good tackle prospect as well. Maybe you can move Neal inside and make him more of a guard. Still potentially see if you can get something from him, but I think that they need a change there. I also think that their receiver room over the past couple of seasons has been very underwhelming. I'd be curious to look back at that 2022 Giants team and see who the leading receiver is. It's probably Isaiah Hodgins. Maybe it's Darius Slayton, but they haven't had a number 1 receiver since Odell Beckham Jr., and that feels like ages ago that he was the effective version of himself that we saw on the Giants. He's been on now 3 other teams since then. So the Giants definitely need to make a move at receiver, I think, as well. This is an incredible receiver draft. I just don't know if I agree with the idea of putting assets together in order to move up in the draft and select a quarterback where, again, I think that some of the quarterbacks are very polarizing. There's a lot of people that say any one of those 3 can be positive impact players, but they each have concerns of their own, I believe. Caleb Williams, I don't know if I buy into the narratives around it, but a lot of people talk about the fact that he's not a leader. He might not care about actually winning. I think that's maybe a little bit overblown, but there are real people out in the industry who have more connections that have heard stuff like this, and that's sort of the takeaway they're coming away with. Caleb Williams also doesn't have tremendous size himself. Jaden Daniels, a massive improvement, a little bit similar. I mean, he got playing time at Arizona State, but a little bit of a similar career arc as Joe Burrow, not quite as accomplished when it comes to the team success. I don't think that was at the fault of Jaden Daniels himself. The defense for LSU was very bad this season, partially allowing him to let loose a little bit more and inflate his stats some. I still think that anticipation-wise, he really improved this past year, and as a downhill thrower, had some pretty good numbers against man coverage, which is a nice sign for him. I think that he's also very thin, and he has taken a lot of big hits during his college career, and I just feel like you can point to issues with any of these prospects, which is pretty much what happens every year, but sort of leads me to the idea that unless you feel like you have a can't miss guy, why would you not just spend the pick itself, but move assets in order to get this guy? Now, I say this, and one way or another, because I know that the Texans ended up picking second and third last season when they took CJ Stroud and Will Anderson. So trading for, I forget which pick they were actually slated for. I believe they were slated for 3 and they traded up to 2 to get Stroud. It was pretty much one and the same because they knew they were taking the guy back to back, those 2 players, that is, back to back. But with Stroud, I feel like, maybe it isn't quite as simple as just that, because he wasn't necessarily a can't miss guy, but he comes out and has a tremendous rookie season. So I don't know. I think that so often in the NFL, with quarterbacks, it's just a crapshoot. And I think that also, if you look at more recently, the 2021 NFL draft, where 4 out of 5 of those guys that were selected in the front half of the first round are likely going to be playing for different teams this upcoming season, the teams they were drafted to. So much of it is based off of the situation you're put in. If you're the Giants here, I don't see the need to move assets and deprive yourself of those future draft picks in order to take a guy that could hit, could not hit, and there's just so much unknown. The Patriots are a team that I think have actually sort of had a very similar structure to the Giants over the course of the past couple of seasons, in a couple ways, with the receivers, with being more so built on the run game offensively, some of those types of factors. The Patriots are a very interesting case because they wouldn't have to move on from anything other than their 3rd overall pick in order to get a quarterback. If they were even 1 pick back, I think that there would be no chance I would be on board for them taking a quarterback. And even now, I still have some hesitations in terms of whether or not they should, because the rest of the team in New England is not up to par. They are not an active contender, and they're sort of on the other end of the Giants, where the Giants would have to move up in order to get a quarterback. The Patriots, if they're going to make any moves, it's them trading down and acquiring more assets to build up the rest of the roster. And I think that makes more sense for the Patriots than the Giants trading up to get a quarterback. They just paid Daniel Jones last season, and I understand he is not the most popular player in the eyes of Giants fans or a lot of NFL fans as a whole. but I thought that he was fine. Again, just fine, but that's all he needed to be in order to lead them to a playoff win. Not just a playoff appearance, but actually stealing a game against a good Vikings team. Wreaked a little bit of fraud if you look at some of the one possession games that they came out on top of 11 out of 11 times in terms of the Vikings here, but that's not the point. I think that the Giants have other needs to address before they go out of their way to go get another quarterback. And if Daniel Jones isn't the guy, so they gave him a contract for, I believe it was 3 years last offseason, but I think they front loaded it where after this upcoming season, I think they have an out to save themselves a lot of money. Now, I didn't actually look ahead before the thing, but if I come into this here, they do have a potential out after this season. So, I don't know. I feel like you can run it back with Daniel Jones this one last year. At this point, if you think that he's sort of a throwaway at the position, you can just run the course out, and you think he's bad, you'll probably have a good draft pick again next year. And I know that I just yesterday on the show said that I don't love the prospects for next year. We're still so far away that who knows, maybe some guys pop up. I mean, Shedeur Sanders was expected to be in that top 3 with Drake May and with Caleb Williams before, Colorado's season sort of went sideways, and it was pretty much a known thing that he would be coming back to college for another season. So maybe he explodes this upcoming year and we see him come back into the good graces of these NFL analysts and everything. So I don't know. I think that it's not an easy decision to come to here, but I just stand by the fact that I think that the Giants are they're further away than just a quarterback, and making a move where you are putting yourself at a disadvantage going forward to take a swing at one of these guys is very risky in my books, and I would not do it personally. I have a lot of Giants fans in my life. I feel like I gotta survey around a little bit and see if they feel any differently. But that is all I have on this segment. We're going to be taking our final break, and when we come back on the other side, we will be talking some college football and the new proposed format for the years to come in terms of playoffs. So stick with us, and we will be right back. Welcome back to the GSMC Sports Podcast. We are headed into our final segment of the day. We are going to be talking a little bit of college football as we just got some news about the proposed format that is going to, again, not officially, but potentially take place in the years to come. So this is coming off of some news that we got within the past few weeks, where we already know that the college football playoffs is expanding this season to 12 teams for the first time. It was introduced in the mid-2010s as a 4-team product, and there's been a lot of calling for expanding it. And we are finally seeing that take place this upcoming season. For this year, it has been agreed upon that it is going to be 12 teams in a 5+7 format. What that means is that the 5 highest ranked conference champions will be guaranteed a postseason berth, and then there are 7 at-large bids for the next best teams remaining in the eyes of, I believe it is still with the selection committee. So with that, the top 4 highest ranked conference champions will be getting a first round bye. This was a format that was unanimously agreed upon by the college football committee, like I mentioned just a couple weeks ago. And shortly after, there were stories popping up about the potential of change in the nearby future as the SEC and the Big Ten conferences were trying to force the committee's hands a little bit, and especially with this college realignment in terms of the conferences, the SEC and the Big Ten have all the premier programs in college football, and they have a little bit of power over the rest of the college football landscape. So the common thought was that these two conferences were going to try and position themselves and put the committee in a position where they would be getting more automatic bids. It was talking about at least 2 per these conferences, and it was, I don't know, I feel like it made sense to a degree, why they would try and make a move such as this, because they have the ability to do so, and it would be, I wouldn't call it mispractice, but it would be a little bit of a waste of power if they didn't try to add to their strength as it was. And they went through a handful of meetings, this committee. We got news yesterday that they are now leaning towards a 14-team playoff model in the years to come. So as opposed to this 5+7 model, this would add a couple more playoff teams, and it would divvy out a weighted distribution of automatic bids to each conference. It's tentatively being described as a 3-3-2-2-1 format, which those numbers indicate the amount of automatic bids each conference would get. That would be 3 for the SEC and the Big Ten, 2 for the ACC and the Big 12, and 1 for the highest ranked group of 5 teams. For those of you who don't know, the group of 5 consists of the AAC, the MAC, Mountain West, Sun Belt, and Conference USA. So that's where you get your Cincinnati working your way into the tournament a couple years ago. A similar situation such as that we've seen in the past, where UCF went undefeated. They didn't make it. They declared themselves national champions. So we can sort of part ways with all of that extra drama on the side and have a, I think, more fair situation here, because even if you take the automatic bids aside, for the most part, I would imagine that the SEC would be having at least 3 teams in a 12-team playoff, and the Big Ten as well, at least a couple there for themselves as well. So it at least gives them some guarantees, while it might not ultimately alter what the playoff teams would look like as it is. The top 2 teams in this 14-team format would receive first-round byes, and in the first round, just like it'll be this upcoming year in the 5+7 format, the higher seeds in the first round will have home field advantage. The quarterfinals and on will be held at bowl sites, which I also believe helps college football, and the fact that we have seen some of these bowl games really deteriorate in terms of their value because they are loaded with programs and players specifically who have other aspirations, whether it is going on to the NFL draft and not wanting to get injured, or it is transferring because their timeline lines up pretty, not very smoothly, I should say, with the transfer portal deadline. So we see a lot of guys end up making their way out of their programs by the time the bowl games come around. Now the bowl games will actually have some more meaning, which I think is definitely a positive, because you have a lot of these sponsors, just like in any sort of contract negotiation between an organization and their sponsors, their business partners. You want the product to actually be good. And we have seen the product of a lot of these bowl games really falling flat the past couple seasons. And I do think that this is going to bring some more juice in. Is it quite the same? No, of what historically has been taking place, but you have to adapt as time moves on, and I think that this is a good adaptation. Now, this 3-3-2-2-1 format has not officially been agreed upon just yet. It has been proposed, and this wouldn't take place until at least 2026. So there's a lot of time in between now and when this would happen. They can sort of figure some things out, but it is important to sort of note the updates and see that we are already potentially looking to expand, despite even not having our first playoffs here with the 12-team format. It is a compromise, though, to keep the SEC and Big Ten happy, where they do hold so much of the power across college sports right now, specifically in football, and which is, of course, the big-time moneymaker for the NCAA. So I don't think that the balance is too unfair towards them, but it keeps them happy. It is, all in all, a big compromise. The biggest concern that comes out of this whole situation is the diminished value of the conference championship games. The fear of losing the lore of regular season college football and all of that has been the main holdup for the majority of people who are against the expansion of the postseason. The other concern is in terms of there are people who talk about this whole idea of participation award culture and all of that, where you are giving in too much and letting everybody be a part of something when the goal here is to win a national championship. So not everybody should be allowed an opportunity to do so. I think that it goes beyond just that because of the fact that, like I mentioned, the bowl games have been really hurting over the past handful of years, and this is something that will help the sport as a whole. We referenced this the last time we talked about college football, where Kirby Smart, the head coach of Georgia, he and his Georgia team that had just one loss in the SEC championship game were more than likely probably one of the best four teams in college football this past year. He and his squad beat down on a Florida State team that notably was missing the majority of their starters. And if he was more arrogant, like there are some other coaches, I think, at some premier programs that probably would have came in with a little bit of an attitude. But Smart went into the post game, and before complimenting his players and building them up and the program up and complaining about not making the playoffs, he acknowledged the fact that it was a problem how drastic the bowl season has gotten, and that there needs to be something that is changed. There needs to be a solution, and I think that this is a step in the right direction. Also, as much as I think that the drama is fun that surrounds the last couple weeks, I should say, of the college football regular season and the selection committee and everything like that. Ultimately, it's a lot of fun, the debate, and then it happens, and then the complaints are a little unbearable. This year really put it over the edge for me with everything that went on with Florida State, and I think that it was just about time for college football to expand, because in still a pretty new format here where there was an actual playoff system, every year people were looking at, oh, well, this has never happened before. An undefeated conference champion has never not made the playoffs. But we were only looking at a decade-ish worth of data. I don't even think it reached the full 10 years. So I just think it was the right direction to move on and sort of part ways with the toxic culture that sort of came with the very exclusive. And maybe I'm being soft in this instance, and we should have people wanting to be excluded, all of that. Again, I just don't feel strongly enough on it one way or another, and I think that the bigger issue across anything was the fact that the bowl game products were really diminished over the course of the past couple years, and this should be a fix. But on to the other issue at hand here with the new format is the fact that it sort of could take a toll on the championship games as far as conference championship games, where if you are an SEC or a Big Ten team, you make the conference championship game, so you are, in theory, top two in your conference. It's that and the third team, and there is a third team that will be coming out of your conference as well. If you have one loss going into this game, you are pretty much guaranteed to be in the playoffs. So what's the point of playing for a conference championship here? Now, there's a chance you could get a bye if you win the conference. You end up as a top two seeded team, but the risk reward is definitely a conversation in these instances, where I think that this is a little bit of the concern. Is college football used to be about winning your conference, having the best possible regular season. If you can make it to the championship game, if you're one of the two teams to do so, then that's awesome. That's the hope, but there's only so much you can control. And now it's at a point where that doesn't seem to mean the same, and to have one individual game determine who wins the conference is a little bit tricky to maneuver how teams will actually compete in a situation such as this, when there is a glaring bigger reward right on the other side of the conference championship game in terms of playoffs. So will these teams actually go out there and compete? I do think that the competitive nature of a lot of these college athletes can't be overlooked. The fact that this has been the most regular season driven sport in all of America for as long as it's existed. And I think that it isn't some sort of a meaningless bowl game like we see in the past where there's nothing to it. Winning a conference is a big deal, but it's just a matter of how big of a deal is it in compared to if you are a real national championship contender. Do you want to risk hurting your players in this game and then having a worse chance to win the national championship? So it could end up looking like a final week of the regular season type deal where a lot of the starters don't play. They are being preserved for the playoffs. And this could lead to maybe a change. And again, keep in mind, we're talking about all of this. This format wouldn't even take place until 2026. So there's a lot of details that still can be ironed out before this actually comes into practice. But it could put an end to conference championship games, especially in these big conferences where there's a lot more at stake. You are guaranteed more playoff spots, all of that. But again, a lot of things to be worked out here, but a lot of time to do so. So other than that, I think it was a pretty good compromise. Final thoughts of the show here in terms of the playoff format. I think that it leaves an interesting element here with Notre Dame. Notre Dame, for as underwhelming as they've been for the past handful of years, they are a historic program, and because of that, they get included in these conversations where they are currently independent, not in a conference, after the 5+7 format that is being held this year. Remember, there was a little bit of outcry in terms of them being put at a disadvantage. They could go undefeated, be dominant during the regular season, and yet because they wouldn't have a conference championship, they would not be given a first round bye because those only go to the top 4 ranked conference winners. So this whole argument too is different because in the 5+7 format, there are 7 at-large bids where Notre Dame could sneak in. In this upcoming one, with the 3-3-2-2-1, there's only 3 at-large bids. So this would hurt them even more. And this could eventually be the sort of last straw for Notre Dame to finally join a conference and try and prevent this. I mean, it would make sense for them. Some of their other sports programs are in conferences. Notre Dame football has just been very adamant on wanting to control things themselves. This might be the end of that, but that is still all to be seen. But on that note, that is all I have for today. Thank you very much for tuning in to the GSMC Sports Podcast. Thank you to the GSMC Sports Network for allowing us to host this show. Just a reminder to like, follow, subscribe wherever you may be catching us, and we will be back tomorrow at 2 o'clock, so we will see you then.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet. Damn, ain't that great.